didn't know whose voice would come out if I opened my mouth to say her name. Kayak 4 was on the rack, and I was holding Kayak 4. Deliberately, at the reflection's eyes, not at your eyes, at the reflection's eyes. Something happens. I want to start with the smell, because that's what I remember most. Not the thing that made me quit after 6 seasons and never go back. The smell. Sunscreen and salt, and the particular kind of heat that builds up inside a wooden shack when it's been baking since 7 in the morning, and you've got no air conditioning, and the nearest shade tree is 100 yards down the beach. That smell is summer to most people. Vacation, freedom. What's important is that for 6 summers, I worked the rental shack at a small bay on the Oregon coast. I checked last spring, and the rental shack is still there, still open, and I don't see the point in burning down his summer before it starts. Maybe it only happens sometimes. I genuinely don't know. The bay is small, maybe half a mile across at its widest point, protected on 3 sides by low bluffs, the kind of place that looks like a postcard and sounds like one too. Gulls, low surf, kids laughing somewhere down the beach. We rented kayaks, paddleboards, a couple of inflatable 2-person canoes that nobody ever wanted because they looked cheap, which they were. Most rentals were 2 hours. Some people took the 4-hour package, which included a waterproof map of the bay and a suggested route that kept you in the central area, away from the edges. The edges were shallow and rocky. That's what we told people. That's what I told people for 3 seasons before I understood that wasn't the real reason. The shack opened at 8. I was usually there by 7:30 to do inventory. You stop thinking. Your hands do the job. Your brain goes somewhere else. It was the summer of my 4th season when my brain stopped being able to go somewhere else. It was the 3rd week of August. A Tuesday mid-morning, the kind of day that makes you understand why people drive 8 hours to the coast. Blue sky, low wind, temperature that felt like the world was finally being reasonable for once. We'd had a full morning. I'd sent out 11 kayaks by 11:30, which was a good number for a Tuesday. Families mostly. A few couples. One guy on his own, which was normal. Solo renters weren't unusual. We just noted it in the log and made sure they had the safety card. The solo renter that morning was named Daniel. I remember his name because I wrote it down. And I remember what I wrote next to it later, which I'll get to. He was maybe 35. Fit, calm, the kind of person who moves through the world without taking up too much space. He'd done this before. He worked with it. He pushed off from the dock at 11:47, heading northeast toward the far side of the bay. And I watched him for a moment, the way I always watch solo renters until they were far enough out to be clearly fine. And then I went back to the shack. The 2-hour window came and went. That wasn't unusual. People lose track of time on the water, especially on a day like that. I noted it in the log, sent him a courtesy text at the 2-hour mark, which was our policy for solo renters. No reply. That was less usual, but not alarming. Cell signal on the water was inconsistent. 4 o'clock came. He'd been out since 11:47, 4 hours and 13 minutes. I called the number on his rental form. It rang 7 times and went to voicemail. At 5:15, I was starting to think about whether to make the call to the Coast Guard. We had a protocol for this, a threshold of time and conditions that triggered an escalation. When Kayak 9 came back. Kayak 9 came back to the dock at 5:19 in the afternoon. It came from the northeast, from the direction Daniel had paddled out toward hours earlier. There was nobody in it. And I stood there for a moment, holding the line, looking at it. The paddle was in the kayak, not floating loose behind it, not missing. In the kayak, in the storage position, laid carefully along the inside of the hull. Whoever had been in this kayak had put the paddle away before they left it. You don't do that if you've fallen in. You don't do that if you've had an emergency. You do that when you're done for the day and you're being considerate about equipment. This paddle was centered. Perfectly centered, equidistant from both ends of the kayak, laid with a precision that didn't look casual. It looked deliberate. It looked like someone had taken time with it. I checked the hull. No damage. I checked the inside. Dry, except for the normal water that gets in during a paddle. That thin film of bay water that pools at the low points. I checked the safety kit in the bow compartment. Still sealed. Untouched. I stood on the dock and I called Daniel's number again. This time it rang twice and then connected. I said his name. I said, "This is the rental shack. I'm calling about the kayak. Are you okay? Where are you?" And the sound on the line was water that the air takes on when there's nothing solid nearby to absorb it. I've spent 6 summers on a bay. I know what that sounds like. The call stayed connected for 40 seconds. I counted because I had nothing else to do. 40 seconds of water sounds and breathing that I couldn't quite hear clearly enough to be certain was breathing. And then the call ended. I filed the report. Coast Guard did a sweep of the bay that evening. They found nothing. No swimmer in distress, no sign of a capsized vessel, no Daniel. He was listed as a missing person the following week. The case is still open, as far as I know. When I pulled Kayak 9 out of the water that evening and logged it back into inventory, I did what I always do. I checked the hull number against the rental log to confirm which unit it was. The hull number was 9. I was right about that. But Kayak 9 had gone out that morning with Daniel at 11:47. And Kayak 9 had also been rented at 9 a.m. that same morning by a family of 4 who returned it at noon, an hour before Daniel even arrived. I checked the log 3 times. Kayak 9 left the dock with Daniel at 11:47. Kayak 9 came back at 5:19, empty, paddle perfectly centered. And Kayak 9 had been sitting on the rack, logged as returned and available, for 2 hours in between. The part that made me stop sleeping is what came next. I didn't tell anyone about the hull numbers. Not my manager, not the Coast Guard, not the other 2 kids who worked the shack with me on weekends. I wrote it in a notebook I kept in the drawer under the register. 1 renter missing. Then I closed the notebook and put it back under the register and told myself I was done thinking about it. I lasted 11 days, because on the 1st of September, it happened again. This time the renter was a woman named Carol, 50-something, silver hair pulled back. The kind of person who asks good questions before they rent anything. How stable is it? What's the recommended route? Is the water cold this time of year? I liked her immediately. She had one of those faces that looks like it spent a lot of time outdoors and made peace with it. She took the 4-hour package. signed the waiver, took the safety card, asked me which direction had the best view of the bluffs. I told her northeast was pretty. The light hits the bluffs differently in the afternoon. I've thought about that a lot since. She pushed off at 1:12 in the afternoon. She was in kayak 3. I watched her clear the dock, get her rhythm, and head northeast the way I'd suggested. 4-hour package. She was due back by 5:12. At 6:30, I was watching the northeast corner of the bay. At 6:44, kayak 3 came back. When kayak 3 came back, the spray skirt was attached to the cockpit rim. From the inside, a spray skirt attaches around the cockpit with a rubber rand. You pull it on from the outside and snap it into the groove that runs around the rim. It's designed to be put on while you're sitting in the kayak before you get in the water. You cannot attach a spray skirt to a cockpit from inside the kayak while sitting in it. The geometry doesn't work, and you certainly cannot attach it from the inside of an empty kayak, from below, with no one in it. I stood on the dock for a long time looking at it. Then I took a picture with my phone, because I'd learned something from the first time. I had no proof of the whole number discrepancy. I had nothing but a note in the back of a green notebook. This time I took 6 pictures from different angles. Carol was never found. I wrote it in the notebook. September 1st, kayak 3. Carol, spray skirt, inside attachment, renter missing. I was 24 and scared, and the job paid well, and I didn't know what I would even say. That's the truth, and it's not a good enough reason, and I know that. There's one more case I want to tell you about before I tell you what I found on the map. This one didn't involve a missing person. This one involves something that, in some ways, I find harder to explain than the missing persons. Because at least a missing person fits inside a category I understand. What happened with Kayak 7 doesn't fit inside any category I have. It was mid-September. Late in the season, crowds thinning out. The quality of light starting to go that direction it goes in September on the Oregon coast. Still beautiful. At 2 in the afternoon, a man came in. 40, maybe 45. He was alone, and he moved with a specific kind of deliberateness that I'd come to associate with people who've spent time in the military, or in jobs where deliberateness is a survival skill. He didn't ask many questions. He took Kayak 7, the 4-hour package, no spray skirt, no add-ons. Signed everything, took the safety card, didn't look at it. Before he pushed off, he stopped. He was standing on the dock, 1 foot in the kayak, and he turned back to me and he said, "What's past the bridge?" We had a railway bridge at the north end of the bay. Old, decommissioned, low over the water. You could paddle under it at mid-tide, but not high. And we always told renters to check the tide chart before going that far north. It was marked as the northern boundary on the rental map. I told him what I always told people. Rocky shallows. Not worth the trip. He looked at me for a moment in a way I didn't entirely understand, and then he nodded and pushed off. He came back at 6:15, on time. Kayak in good condition. He tied it off himself, which renters weren't supposed to do. I was supposed to do it. He stepped onto the dock and he walked past me toward the parking lot, and I said something standard like, "How was it?" And he stopped walking but didn't turn around. He said, "Don't let people go past the bridge." I said, "Wasn't planning on it." He said, "I mean ever. Don't let anyone go past the bridge." and then he got in his car and left. I looked at the kayak. There was something on the floor of the hull that hadn't been there when I checked it out. A line of wet footprints tracking from the bow of the kayak toward the stern, as if someone had walked the length of it. The prints were small, not child small, but small. A narrow foot, no tread pattern, bare. The man had been wearing water shoes. I'd noticed when he signed in. The prints weren't his. I took pictures. I wrote it down. And then I pulled out the rental map, the waterproof one we gave to 4-hour customers. And I looked at the northern boundary. The railway bridge was marked. Beyond it, the map showed the bay tapering and then ending, with a notation in small text. Shallow water, do not proceed. Beyond the notation, beyond the marked boundary, there was a small area of the map that had been not printed over, not redacted, just left without detail. No depth markings, no landmarks, no color indicating water or land. Just blank paper, the color of nothing, in the shape of whatever was past that bridge. I'd looked at that map for 4 summers. I had never seen that blank space before. I don't know if it had always been there and I'd never looked closely enough, or if something else was true. I was going to wait. I locked the shack at 8:15. That was normal. That was what I did every evening. Count the cash, log the final inventory, lock the shack, walk to my car. Except that night, I didn't walk to my car. I walked to the dock, and I sat down on the end of it, with my legs hanging over the water, and I waited. I want to tell you what the bay looks like at night, because I think it matters. During the day, it's postcard pretty in a way that makes you stop noticing it after the first week. Your eyes adjust to beautiful the same way they adjust to bright light. After a while, you stop seeing it. But at night, the bay becomes something different. The water goes black and flat, the kind of flat that doesn't look like water anymore. That looks like a surface you could walk on if you were stupid enough to try. The bluffs disappear into the dark, and you lose the sense of enclosure, the sense of the bay being a contained thing with edges. At night, it feels open, connected to something larger, something you can't see the far side of. I sat on the end of the dock for a long time. The tide was going out. I could tell by the sound of it, the particular rhythm of receding water, the way it pulls against the pilings differently than incoming tide. A sound I'd learned without meaning to over 6 summers, until it was as automatic as reading a clock. Low tide was around 11. I sat and listened to the tide go out and watched the black water and tried to decide whether I was being brave or stupid, and couldn't come to a conclusion. At 10:40, the bay went quiet. Not quieter. They stopped. Between one moment and the next, as completely as if someone had turned a dial. I became aware that I was holding my breath. I let it out slowly and tried to breathe normally and watched the northern end of the bay, where the railway bridge crossed low over the water, a black line against a slightly less black sky. Nothing moved for a long time. And then Kayak 4 came back. I say came back because I don't have a better phrase for what it did. It moved across the water from the direction of the bridge, steady and unhurried, with no sound. No paddle sounds, no water displacement sounds, nothing. I didn't move. I'm not sure I could have. It bumped the dock softly, the way they always do. And I reached down without standing and caught the line on the bow and held it. And I sat there on the end of the dock in the dark, holding a kayak that had just crossed the bay by itself in silence. And I looked inside it. Empty. Not like the others. not just absent of a person. Empty in a way that felt total, felt considered. The way a room feels empty when it's been deliberately cleared rather than just left. The seat was dry, the hull was dry. Not the dry of a kayak that hasn't been on the water. The dry of a kayak that has been on the water and then dried, as if it had been out there long enough for the water to leave it. No pooling at the low points, no film on the hull. Dry and clean in a way that should have taken hours in the right conditions. The paddle was in its place, centered as it had been in Kayak 9, equidistant, precise. I looked at the hull number, Kayak 4. Kayak 4 had gone out that morning with a young couple on the 2-hour package. They'd come back at noon, laughing about something, the way couples do on vacations when things are going well and they don't know yet which things won't last. I'd logged it back in myself. I'd put it on the rack. I pulled out my phone and I turned on the flashlight and I checked the rack. Kayak 4 was on the rack. I was holding Kayak 4's line with one hand and my phone with the other. And Kayak 4 was on the rack 20 feet behind me, and I was holding Kayak 4. I put my phone away. I sat with that for a moment that I couldn't measure. Then I did something that I have tried to explain to myself many times since, with varying levels of success. I tied the kayak off, carefully, with a proper knot, the way you tie a boat when you expect it to still be there in the morning. Not because I thought it would be. Some habits are deeper than fear. My hands did what my hands knew how to do, and while they were doing it, my brain was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quiet and white, and not yet ready to process what was happening on the dock. I walked back to the shack. I got the notebook. Then I wrote one more thing, and I'm going to tell you what it was because it's important for what comes next. I wrote, "Someone came back from past the bridge tonight. Not a person, but something came back, and it knows where the dock is." I quit at the end of that week. I told my manager I had a family situation. He said he was sorry to hear that, said I'd been one of his best, said to reach out if I ever wanted to come back next summer. And I was fine. I was genuinely fine for almost 2 years. Until about 8 months ago, when someone sent me a message through a mutual friend. The message was short. It said, "I think something happened to me at a kayak rental place on the Oregon coast this summer. I think you might know what I'm talking about. I don't know who else to ask." I wrote back. We talked for a long time, and what he told me is something I can't tell you myself because I wasn't there, and because the details matter too much to get wrong. So I'm going to let him tell it. His name is Marcus. He's 31. He lives in Portland now, which is about 2 hours from the bay. He took a solo trip to the coast in early August. He rented a kayak. He came back and said, "Don't let anyone go past the bridge." I mean it the way I meant it when I wrote in the notebook. I would have preferred he didn't come back either. I'll let Marcus explain why.
I'm going to start with the coffee. Not because the coffee matters, but because I've been trying to figure out where to start this for about 3 months now. And every time I try to start with something that actually matters, the water, the bridge, the thing I saw when I looked at my shadow, I freeze up. So I'm starting with the coffee because the coffee is the last normal thing I remember clearly. And maybe if I start there, I can get to the rest of it without stopping. I make good coffee. I'm not being precious about it. It's just a thing I've figured out over the years, the ratio, the temperature, the time. My wife says I'm obsessive about it, and she's right, and I don't apologize for it. That morning I made it the right way, in the right ratio, and I put it in the good thermos, the stainless one that keeps it hot for 6 hours, and I put the thermos in the bow storage of the kayak before I pushed off. I never opened it. I was on the water for what felt like 2 hours, maybe a little more. It was hot. I was paddling hard enough to work up a real thirst. I should have opened the thermos at least twice. I know I was thirsty. I remember being thirsty. A specific physical memory of my mouth being dry and my throat wanting something cold, or at least cool. But when I came back to the dock, the thermos was sealed. Full, untouched. That's where I'm starting. With the coffee, I never drank. Because everything else I'm about to tell you, the hours I can't account for, the sadness on my palms, the way the water looked on the other side of the bridge, all of it has explanations that I can almost make work if I try hard enough. Heat stroke, disorientation, adrenaline doing strange things to memory. The coffee doesn't have an explanation. You don't forget to drink water for 6 hours in August heat. Your body doesn't allow that. And if somehow you did, you wouldn't feel the specific memory of thirst while simultaneously having no memory of drinking anything. Those two things can't both be true. But they are. They both are. That I am not careless with details. I am professionally careful with details. I notice when sequences don't add up. The sequence of that day in August does not add up. I've been over it more times than I can count. The way you go over something when you can't let it go, and it doesn't add up. And at a certain point, I had to accept that the reason it doesn't add up is not because I'm missing something. It's because something is missing from me. I drove to the coast alone. I came home with an empty thermos and sadness on both palms and several hours of my life that belonged to somewhere I can't name. The rental shack was the kind of place that looks exactly like what it is. Sun-bleached wood, handwritten price board, a guy behind the counter who looked like he'd been there since the previous summer and hadn't quite left. He was maybe mid-20s. Quiet. He checked me in efficiently, gave me the safety card, showed me the map. He pointed out the northern boundary on the map, the railway bridge, said the water past it was shallow and rocky and not worth the trip. He said it the way people say things they've said many times, automatically, looking slightly past me rather than at me. I signed the waiver and took Kayak 7 and pushed off just after 10 in the morning. The bay was exactly what it looked like in the pictures I'd found online when I was planning the trip. Small, protected, the water a particular shade of blue-green that you only get on the Oregon coast when the sun is right. I got into my rhythm quickly. I'd kayaked before, not regularly, but enough to be competent. And I let the morning take over. The sound of the paddle, the light on the water, the feeling that the rest of the world had been put on hold for a few hours. I was happy. The kind of happy that's just contentment, just the body doing something it was built to do in conditions that are good for it. No complicated emotions. Just a man on the water on a blue morning in August. And then I noticed the shadow.
I noticed it the way you notice something that your brain has been registering for a while before you consciously clock it. A slow surfacing, a pulling into focus of something that was already there. I was paddling northeast, the sun over my right shoulder, and I looked down at the water the way you do sometimes when you're in a rhythm, not thinking about anything specific. And I saw my shadow on the water's surface. It was on the wrong side. Sun to my right, shadow to my right. A shadow falls away from its light source. This is not a complicated concept. I've understood this since I was a child. Sun to your right, shadow to your left. Always. I stopped paddling. I looked at the sun. To my right, slightly behind me, exactly where I'd registered it all morning. I looked at the shadow. To my right, between me and the sun. I looked at this for what was probably 10 seconds. but felt like considerably longer. My brain kept running the calculation and kept getting the same answer and kept refusing to accept it. Sun right, shadow right, does not compute. Run again, sun right, shadow right, does not compute. Then a small wave moved under the kayak and the shadow shifted with it, and for just a moment it looked normal. Shadow left, sun right, the world working the way the world works. And I took a breath and told myself I'd been confused about my orientation. I'd gotten turned around somehow. The sun was actually to my left. I was heading northeast, as I had been all morning. The sun was to my right. I picked up the paddle and I kept going. I told myself what you tell yourself. I'm tired, I'm overheated, I'm seeing things. The water was playing tricks with the light. I told myself these things with the specific conviction of a person who needs very badly to believe them. I almost did believe them. I was maybe 200 yards from the railway bridge when I stopped paddling again. I hadn't planned to go to the bridge. I'd noted the boundary on the map, understood it was the limit of the rental area, and had been navigating generally northeast without specifically heading for it. But I'd drifted further north than I'd meant to. And now it was close, maybe a minute of paddling, and I could see it clearly. Old iron, dark with age, riding low over the water. The tide was mid, low enough to clear it by several feet. Beyond the bridge, the water changed. I don't mean the color, though the color was different too. A deeper blue. A blue that didn't match the afternoon light the way it should have. I mean the surface. This side of the bridge, the water had the small, natural texture of a protected bay on a light wind day. Tiny ripples, small variations, the constant minor motion of water that's alive. Beyond the bridge, the water was flat, not calm flat. Flat in a way that looked structural, like a floor. I floated there and looked at it for a while. And then I paddled forward and went under the bridge. The sound changed when I passed under it. A brief second of the iron structure overhead, the acoustics shifting, my own paddle sound suddenly close and contained. And then I was through. And the sound didn't come back. The gulls I'd been hearing all morning, the low conversation of the water, the distant coastal highway. All of it had been constant background to the entire morning. So constant I'd stopped registering it, the audio equivalent of furniture. Past the bridge, there was none of it. The water under the kayak was flat and soundless, and the color of deep ocean, even though I was in a bay that couldn't have been more than 20 feet deep at its center. I held the paddle across my lap and I sat in the silence. And I looked at the water around me, and I thought I should go back. I thought it clearly and completely, and with total conviction. And then I thought it again. And then I was at the dock. Not. And I want to be very precise here, because the sequence matters, and I've gone over it enough times to be certain. Not after a period of turning around and paddling back. Not after any transition I can account for. One moment I was past the bridge in the flat, silent water, thinking I should go back. The next moment I was at the dock. No bridge. No transit. No memory of the water between there and here. No memory of the sound returning. No memory of the approach to the dock or the moment of arriving. I was there, and then I was here, and between those two things, there is nothing. I looked at my phone. 5 hours and 40 minutes. The kid at the rental shack was watching me walk up the dock. He didn't say anything when I handed back the kayak. He looked at my face, and then he looked at the kayak, and then he looked at my hands. I noticed him looking at my hands, and I looked at them too. And that's when I saw the Sadeni for the first time, red lines across both palms like rope burns. I walked to my car. I called Renata. She picked up immediately, and I could tell from her voice that she'd been waiting, that the 12 times she'd tried to reach me had accumulated into something. I told her I was fine. I told her I was on my way home. She asked how it was. I said fine. I said the bay was beautiful. I said I'd tell her about it when I got home. I haven't told her about it. Not the shadow, not the silence, not the 5 hours and 40 minutes with nothing inside them. I've told her I had a good day and the water was nice, and I think next time she should come with me. I've told her this several times in the weeks since. She smiles when I say it, and the smile doesn't reach her eyes, and she says yes, maybe next time. And then she finds something to do in a different room. 2 weeks after the trip, I was in the kitchen making coffee early in the morning, before Renata was awake, and I heard her phone buzz on the nightstand. I wasn't listening. I wasn't trying to hear anything. But the apartment is small, and she answered it quickly, quietly, the way you answer a phone when you're trying not to wake someone. And I heard her say, "He seems fine. I mean, he seems like himself. It's just like when you see someone you know, but something's slightly off. Like when you can't tell if it's the same person or just someone who looks like them." She didn't say anything after that for a while. I could hear the person on the other end talking, but not the words. I stood at the counter with my hands on the coffee things, and I did not move. Then she said, I don't know what I'm saying. Go back to sleep. I'll call you later." She hung up. I finished making the coffee. I have not told her I heard that. I have not told anyone any of this until I found a contact through a mutual friend. Someone who used to work at the rental shack on the same bay, the same summer, who reached out through a message that said he thought something was happening there that he couldn't explain. And I wrote back. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing I've been sitting with for 3 months. The thing that I wake up with at 4 in the morning and can't put back down. I believe I went past the bridge. I believe something happened in the water on the other side. I believe I came back. My body came back. My face came back. The version of me that makes coffee and goes to work and tells his wife the bay was beautiful. All of that came back. What I don't know is whether that's the same thing as me coming back. And I don't know how to find out. Because every time I try to look for the answer in the details, in the shadow, in the thermos, in the Sadeni on my palms, I run into the same problem. I run into the mirror. Either way, I'm going to tell you exactly what I observed in the sequence I observed it, and you can decide what it means. 3 days after I got back from the bay, I was getting ready for work. Early morning, still dark outside, bathroom light on. I was at the sink, the mirror in front of me, doing what you do in the morning. Looking at your face the way you look at something familiar, without really seeing it. Your brain on autopilot while you think about the day. And I noticed my reflection blink. Not with me, a fraction of a second after me. A lag so small that if I hadn't been in a particular state of early morning unfocused attention, the kind where your eyes are open but your brain is still arriving, I would have missed it entirely. I stood very still. I blinked again, deliberately, slowly. My reflection blinked with me. Normal, simultaneous. I stood there for another 30 seconds. And I told myself I was tired. I told myself the brain does strange things in the early morning when it's not fully online yet. I told myself this was nothing. I got dressed and went to work. But I started noticing other things. 2 weeks after the bay, I was in a meeting at work. Afternoon meeting, conference room with windows on one side, sun coming through at a low angle the way it does in August in the late afternoon. There were 6 of us around the table. At some point, I don't remember exactly when, somewhere in the middle of a discussion about freight routing, I looked at the window and saw all of our shadows on the opposite wall. 5 shadows. I counted them twice. The window was to my left. The shadows fell to the right, across the white wall behind the presenter's screen. I counted the shapes. 5 shadows for 6 people. I looked at the people around the table. 6. Looked at the shadows. 5. I spent the rest of the meeting trying to figure out which person had no shadow, looking from each person to the wall and back again. And I couldn't determine it with certainty because the shadows overlapped in the center and the light angle made the edges unclear. By the time the meeting ended, the sun had shifted and the shadows were gone. What if it was mine? What if whatever came back from past the bridge casts its shadow differently? And in the bay, I'd seen it clearly because there was nothing else to compare it to. And in ordinary life, it's hidden because shadows overlap, because light is inconsistent, because people don't look at shadows closely enough to notice. What if I've been the wrong shadow in a room full of right ones for 3 months and nobody has noticed? Almost nobody. I called Renata from the parking garage after work. I asked, "Has anything seemed strange to you lately? About me? About anything?" A pause, short but present. She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know. I've been feeling a little off since the coast. I just wondered if you'd noticed anything." Another pause. She said, "You seem fine. You seem like yourself." And then she said, very carefully, in the voice she uses when she's choosing words, "You've just been a little quiet, that's all." I sat in the parking garage for a while after the call. I thought about the words she'd used. You seem fine. You seem like yourself. Not you are fine. You are yourself. Seem, a word that maintains a particular kind of distance between observation and conclusion. She chose seem. I drove home. I picked up Thai food, the place we both like, the order I know by heart. I set the table the way I always set it. We ate and talked about her day and a show we'd been watching and whether we wanted to go to her sister's in October. Normal, warm, the furniture of a life that fits. After dinner, I washed the dishes, and she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, and at some point, I looked over at her and she was looking at me. Not the way you look at someone you live with, the comfortable, unfocused look of familiarity. The way you look at something you're trying to identify. Something that requires the specific effort of looking. She looked away when she saw me notice. Neither of us said anything. I've thought about that look every day since. I've tried to read it as affection, as tiredness, as distraction. I went to the rental shack on a Saturday in mid-September. I told myself I was going for a drive, that I happened to end up on the coast, that stopping was a casual decision. This was not true. I drove there directly, 2 hours each way, with the specific intention of going back and looking at the bay in daylight and talking to the person at the counter. The shack was still open. Late season, fewer customers. The sun-bleached look more pronounced. There was someone behind the counter, but it wasn't the same person. New kid. Younger, if that was possible, with the specific energy of someone who'd been hired to finish out a season and was counting the remaining days. I asked if the guy who'd been working there in August was still around. He said, "He left. Like a week into September, I think. Family thing." I said I was a customer from August. I'd had a good experience. I'd wanted to say thanks. He said, "Yeah, I don't have his info. Sorry." I looked at the map on the wall behind him. Same map we'd been given as customers, blown up and laminated and mounted. I looked at the northern boundary, the railway bridge, the notation, shallow water, do not proceed. I looked at the space beyond the notation. From here, from this distance, it looked like the map just ended. Like the bay ended. Like there was simply nothing beyond that point worth representing. I asked if I could rent a kayak. The kid said, "Sure, which package?" I said, "Just a couple of hours." And then I said, "What's past the bridge up there?" He looked at me. Flat look, not unfriendly. The look of someone repeating something they've been told. "Shallow water, rocky, nothing worth seeing." I said, "Have you been up there yourself?" He said, "We're not supposed to go past the marked boundaries." I said, "But have you?" He looked at the counter and then back at me. "No." He said it the way you say something true that you've decided is the complete answer, even though it isn't. I didn't rent a kayak. I drove home. That night I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, not looking at my face, looking at my shadow on the wall behind me, the one cast by the overhead light. I stood there and I moved my arm and watched the shadow move with it, and everything was normal and synchronized and correct. And I stood there until my legs were tired and the overhead light felt like it was pressing down on me. And then I turned off the bathroom light and stood in the dark for a moment. In the dark, I could feel myself breathing, feel my heart, feel the specific weight of my body standing on the bathroom floor. All of it real, all of it present, all of it mine. I turned the light back on. The mirror, my face, my reflection looking back at me with an expression I'd been wearing all evening, tired, cautious, the face of a person trying to determine something. I looked at my reflection for a long time. And then I did something I've done every night since. Because I can't stop doing it. Because my brain won't let me leave the bathroom without doing it. I watched my reflection's eyes. You don't think about your eyes when you're looking in a mirror. You look at your face, at the general picture. You're not watching your eyes specifically. But if you stand there long enough and look specifically, deliberately, at the reflection's eyes, not at your eyes, at the reflection's eyes, something happens. A shift in how you're perceiving it. A slight alienation of the image that's always there in mirrors if you look at them long enough. That uncanny quality that comes from staring at any familiar thing until it becomes unfamiliar. I know this. I've read about it. It's a known perceptual phenomenon. I know this, and I still can't stop doing it. Because the alternative is not checking. And I'm not ready to not check yet. I'm not ready to look away from the mirror and just trust that what's looking back is me. That's where I was when I got the message from the person who used to work the rental shack. The message that said, "I think you might know what I'm talking about." I wrote back the same night. We talked for a long time. He told me about the kayaks, about the hull numbers, about the man with the careful movements who said, "Don't let anyone go past the bridge." About the night he stayed late and waited and what came back across the black water in the silence. And he told me the last thing he'd written in the notebook before he quit. Someone came back from past the bridge tonight. Not a person, but something came back. And it knows where the dock is. I read that and I sat with it for a while. Then I asked him, "The person who came back, the one you saw walking up the dock, what did he look like?" he described someone. The description was accurate. He was describing me. I don't know exactly when I went past the bridge. My memory says August, the solo trip, the day with the coffee I never drank. But he quit in September. He was there in September. He saw someone walk up the dock in September. I haven't taken a trip to the coast since August. I have no memory of September. Not gone. I have memories of September. I went to work. I talked to Renata. I did the things I do. But they have the quality of things I've been told happened rather than things I remember happening. A slight distance. A film between me and them. Like reading someone else's account of your own life. I called him back after I read the description. I asked, how did he look? The person walking up the dock. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, he looked fine. He looked completely normal. He paused. That's what I couldn't explain. That's what I wrote in the notebook. I would have preferred he didn't come back. Not because he looked wrong. Another pause. Because he looked too right. He looked the way someone looks when they're trying very hard to look normal. And doing it perfectly. And that's not the same thing as being normal. I hung up. I went to the mirror. I stood there for a long time. And then I noticed something I had somehow not noticed in 3 months of standing in front of this mirror. Something small, specific. The kind of detail that shouldn't matter and does. My coffee mug was on the bathroom counter. I'd brought it in with me the way I sometimes do when I'm getting ready in the morning and don't want to stop drinking coffee just because I need to brush my teeth. It was sitting on the counter to the left of the sink. White mug, black handle, a small chip on the rim that happened when Renata moved it once and caught it on the faucet. I've been drinking from that mug for 3 years. I know what it looks like. I looked at the mug. I looked at the mug in the mirror. The chip on the rim is on the left side. I know this. I've drunk from that mug every morning for 3 years, and the chip is on the left side where it caught the faucet, and I know this the way I know my own name. In the mirror, the chip was on the right side, which is correct, which is how mirrors work. Left becomes right. The chip is on the left, its reflection is on the right. This is not strange. This is physics. I know this. But I stood there and I looked at the mug and its reflection, and I thought, I have been looking at this mirror for 3 months. Every night, checking, running the comparison. And I have been doing it wrong. Because a mirror doesn't show you what's wrong. A mirror shows you the reverse of what's real. And if you're standing in front of a mirror trying to determine whether what you're seeing is you, the real you, the original, the one that went to the coast in August and should have come home, you cannot use the mirror to do it. The mirror will always show you the reverse. The mirror will always show you the version of the thing that is not quite the thing itself. The mirror is not a test. The mirror is the problem. I put down the mug. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, and I thought about this for a long time. Here is what I know. Here is the thing I've been building toward for 3 months, the conclusion that I've been circling and refusing to land on, because landing on it means accepting what it means. Something went past the bridge in August. Something came back. The person who worked the shack kept a notebook. He wrote down the cases, the hull numbers, the spray skirt attached from inside, the impossible footprints in a kayak rented by a man in water shoes. He stayed late one night and watched something cross the black water in silence and tie up at the dock, and he looked inside it. And it was empty in a way that felt considered, deliberate. Not empty like something left. Empty like something that knows how to present itself as empty when it needs to. And he saw someone walk up the dock. Someone who looked fine. Someone who looked too right. He saw that in September. I have no memory of September. I have memories from September. The film quality memories. The ones that feel received rather than lived. Work. Renata. The furniture of a life. But I don't have September the way I have August, the way I have July, the way I have any month before the coast. Those months have texture. September doesn't. September is smooth, frictionless, like a surface that's been prepared. I thought about Renata on the phone in the early morning, the voice she uses when she's choosing words. He seems fine. He seems like himself. I thought about the look across the dinner table, the editor's look, checking whether what she's seeing matches what she expects to find. I thought about what she'd said to whoever was on the phone. Like when you see someone you know, but something's slightly off. Like when you can't tell if it's the same person or just someone who looks like them. Renata is careful with words. Renata knows the difference between seem and are, between looks like and is. She has spent 3 months living with something she can't file anywhere. Something that presents itself correctly in every checkable way and still fails some checks she can't articulate. And she has been carrying that alone because what would she say? What would any person say? Honey, I think something came back from the bay instead of you. I got off the edge of the bathtub and I went to the kitchen. It was late. Renata was asleep. I made coffee, the right ratio, the right temperature, the process my hands know. And I sat at the kitchen table, and I did what I do at work. The sequence doesn't add up. I laid it out in order. I looked at it whole. Renata, 3 months of seem and looks like, and the careful look across the table and a phone call at 4 a.m. that she didn't know I heard. The man who worked the shack, sitting somewhere inland now with a green notebook in a box in his closet, who watched something walk up the dock in September and wrote, I would have preferred he didn't come back. And then there is one more thing. The one I've been sitting on since the phone call, the one I haven't said out loud yet because saying it out loud makes it the kind of thing I can't take back. I asked him on the call about the man who came back in September, the one he saw walking up the dock. He described someone, and the description was accurate. But I asked one more question after that. After he said he looked too right, after he said that's not the same thing as being normal, after the pause, I asked, when he handed back the kayak, did he say anything? Another pause, longer. Then he said, yeah. He said something. I didn't understand it at the time. I wrote it in the notebook because I wrote everything in the notebook. I asked what he said. He said, the guy handed back the kayak, and he looked at me and he said, the water past the bridge is fresh, not salt, fresh. And then he said, you should write that down. Fresh water, a bay on the Oregon coast, salt water, tidal, connected to the Pacific, and past the bridge, beyond the boundary, in the flat, impossible silence. Fresh water. I looked at the satiny on my palms the night I came home. Red lines, both hands, symmetrical, like rope marks, like something held or held onto. For a long time, I hadn't been wearing rope. I'd been wearing paddling gloves that showed no damage. Symmetrical marks on both palms, the kind you get from gripping something you couldn't let go of, or the kind you get from something gripping you. I put my hands flat on the kitchen table and I looked at them. 3 months later, the marks were gone, healed clean. But I remember where they were. I remember the pattern. And sitting at the kitchen table at whatever hour it was, with the coffee getting cold, I understood something I'd been refusing to understand. Whatever is past the bridge doesn't take you. It doesn't pull you under or make you disappear the way the others disappeared. It does something else. Something that takes time. Something that requires that you come back. Something that needs you on this side. I don't know what that means. I want to be honest with you about what I don't know, because I've spent 3 months being dishonest with myself about it, and it hasn't helped. I don't know what came back from the bay. I don't know what I am. Standing in my kitchen at this hour, in this life, with this coffee and this apartment and this woman sleeping down the hall who has spent 3 months being careful with words. What I know is what I've told you. The sequence, the details, the things that don't add up when you lay them all out in order and look at them whole. And I know one more thing, the thing I've been leaving until last, because it's the thing that changed what I'm doing, that changed a private confusion into something I felt I had to say out loud. Last week I came home from work and Renata was in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter and she was on the phone, and she didn't hear me come in because I came in quietly. The way I've come in quietly for 3 months. The way you come in quietly when you've learned that you might hear something important in the seconds before someone knows you're there. She was saying, I know. I know that's not a rational thing to say. But I keep thinking about that trip to the coast. I keep thinking about how he was before and how he is now, and I can't find the line. I can't find where it changed. It's like there's no moment I can point to and say, here, this is where it happened. What if he didn't come back? What if something else is sleeping in my bed? I stood in the hallway. I stood there for a long time. And then I did something I still don't fully understand. I didn't go in. I put my back against the wall, and I stood in the dark of the hallway, and I listened to my wife describe me to someone I'll never know. In words I don't have an argument against, and I didn't go in, because I didn't know what she would see if I walked through that door in that moment. I didn't know what my face would do. I didn't know whose voice would come out if I opened my mouth to say her name. I don't know that now. I waited another minute. And then I walked in like I'd just arrived, bag over my shoulder, and I said, hey, how was your day? And she turned around and smiled and said, fine, busy. The Henderson project was behind schedule. She fell asleep before me the way she always does, and I lay in the dark and listened to her breathe. Toward morning, she turned toward the door, the way she sleeps now. The listening way. I don't blame her. I don't know what I am. I want to be honest about that. The same way I've tried to be honest about everything else in this. I know what I was. The coffee ratio. The chip on the left side of the mug. The shape of a good morning on the water with the sun to the right and the shadow going the right direction. I know all of that. I carry all of that. I just can't tell you with certainty whether carrying something is the same as owning it. Whether memory is proof, whether I am the thing that remembers, or the thing that was given the memories and told to continue. The man who worked the shack told me at the end of our last call that he'd gotten as far as the parking lot twice, sat in his car, driven home both times. He said, if I go back, it'll know I'm there. And I don't know if what goes past that bridge can tell the difference between someone looking for answers and someone it can use. I think about the rental shack and the kid behind the counter who will be there again in June, and the map on the wall with the blank space past the boundary, and the railway bridge riding low over the water. And beyond it, the wrong-colored flat silence, where something waited long enough for me to stop paddling and look around. I think about what it wanted. I think about whether it got it. The shack opens in June, and I don't know which of those things frightens me more.